Welcome to Business Matters. For the first time in nearly a year, the U.S. services sector contracted in May. The Institute for Supply Management shared that its non-manufacturing purchasing managers index dropped to just under 50. It's the first dip under 50 and the lowest reading since June of last year. This comes as businesses are paying higher prices for inputs. At the same time, economists note tariff uncertainty is making it difficult for businesses to plan ahead. And Raytheon has secured a $1 billion contract with the U.S. Navy. Its defense arm, RTX, will be producing more of its short-range AIM-9X Block II missiles. The deal will ramp up production to 2,500 per year. The air-to-air and surface-to-air missiles are used by more than 30 U.S. allies and partners. Demand for missiles and military equipment has remained strong and is expected to increase with ongoing geopolitical tension. And pulled funding could be the next step for California's high-speed rail project. The Trump administration says there is no viable path forward for the project and warned it may rescind $4 billion in government funding in the coming weeks. The Transportation Department cited missed deadlines, budget shortfalls, and questionable ridership projections. California voters approved the project nearly 2 decades ago, and the additional funding was granted by the Biden administration. Pay for United Airlines flight attendants could be gaining altitude. The tentative deal was reached between the Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, and the airline. The details released show that cabin members would receive a pay increase of up to 45%. This would be over the contract's duration of 5 years. The immediate raise would see hourly rates go from about $29 to about $37. By the end of the contract, that would be close to $42. For senior flight attendants, hourly rates go from about $67 to about $84, and by the end of the contract, that would be close to $96. The deal would also add half pay during boarding. Usually, flight attendants are only paid for the time of flight. Voting opens July 7th and ends on July 29th. And U.S. private employers added the fewest number of workers in more than 2 years. Payroll processor ADP reported that private sector jobs rose by 37,000 in May. That's the smallest increase since March 2023 and is below expectations. The slowdown was driven by losses in goods-producing sectors. In the report, ADP's chief economist said that hiring is losing momentum, but pay growth is holding at robust levels. Following the data, President Trump again called on Fed Chair Jerome Powell to cut interest rates, citing global rate cuts and signs of weakening labor demand. The ADP report comes 2 days before the government's monthly jobs report. It's often seen as a preview to the government report, but has less impact. And higher U.S. tariffs on imported steel and aluminum kicked in today. President Trump signed a proclamation yesterday that put into effect his announcement from last week when he said he would double the levies from 25% to 50%. Here's more.
White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said the move came after analysis showed the steel industry needed more help. The increase will apply to all trading partners except the UK, which is the only country to have struck a trade deal with the US. Its rate will stay at 25%, but the country is not a major exporter of metals to the US. Canada looks set to be hit hard by the new increase, however, as it's the top supplier of steel to America. And Mexico, another major exporter, said it would seek an exemption. Economy Secretary Marcelo Ebrard said the tariffs were unfair, as the US has a trade surplus in steel with Mexico. Wednesday was also the deadline set by Washington for nations to submit their best offers on trade. That's if they want to avoid Trump's Liberation Day tariffs taking effect in 5 weeks. Those duties were imposed, then paused for 90 days to allow time for talks. The White House says it has sent a letter to trading partners reminding them of the deadline. It asks countries to list their best offers in various sectors and says they will get an indication of the likely response within days. At issue for most nations is whether they retain the baseline 10% rate set for most shipments to the US or face a sharp increase. Japan said it had not received any letter regarding the offer deadline.
Microsoft is offering a cybersecurity program to European governments free of charge. It was launched today and aims to bolster their defenses against cyber threats. This comes after a surge in cyber attacks in Europe. Many are linked to state-sponsored actors from China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Increasingly, attackers employ generative AI to amplify the scale and impact of their operations, ranging from disrupting critical infrastructure to spreading disinformation. Customers of late Ponzi schemer Bernard Madoff will recover $498 million under a new settlement. The agreement with liquidators of two Luxembourg funds puts their recovery at about $15 billion. The Luxembourg Investment Fund and Luxembourg Investment Fund U.S. Equity Plus had invested exclusively with Madoff's firm for 3 years before it collapsed in December 2008. A trustee liquidating Madoff's firm said the $498 million represents all transfers that the Luxembourg funds received from the firm. Madoff concealed his fraud for decades before confessing to his sons in 2008. He pleaded guilty to 11 criminal charges and was sentenced to 150 years in prison. Madoff died in April 2021 at age 82. Empty carts and reduced scrolling from U.S. shoppers, tariffs, and a closed shipping loophole are hitting Chinese-owned e-commerce companies. Market intelligence firm Sensor Tower found daily U.S. users for Temu fell by nearly 50% last month compared to March. Sales growth and customer growth rates in the U.S. are declining for both Temu and rival Shein. Consulting firm Bain & Company noted that the dips followed President Trump's tariff announcement, and this is on top of both retailers losing a shipping practice known as de minimis last month. This had allowed Chinese companies to ship low-value packages into the U.S. tariff-free. Major cracks are forming over China's strong hold on rare earth minerals. Global leaders and corporations are revealing the dire fate for many industries, especially cars, if China doesn't loosen export restrictions.
Global automakers are leaning on the horn, a warning that production could be delayed or halted while companies navigate China's export restrictions. In April, China suspended exports on a wide range of rare earth minerals and related magnets. These are used for everything from cars and missiles to electronics. Beijing now requires export licenses. As a result, rare earth magnet exports from China halved in April. The mineral curbs came just 2 days after President Trump announced sweeping tariffs. The move underscores China's dominance of the critical minerals industry. Indian automakers have warned of possible shutdowns over shortages in the critical minerals supply chain. Chinese state media reports that China is considering relaxing the curbs for European semiconductor firms. And as for the U.S., an official says the rare earth curbs were supposed to be dropped as part of a temporary tariff deal, but described the removal as slow rolling.
China's restrictions on rare earth mineral exports are shaking up the European auto industry. The EU trade chief says he's hoping to clarify the situation with China. NTD's Sean Marshall takes a closer look at how the export restrictions are impacting European car makers.
The instability of supply chains for rare earth minerals is starting to show, most notably in Europe, where the auto industry is being shaken up by the tightening of rare earth exports by the Chinese Communist regime. BMW says this has affected its supplier network, but plants are running normally. But Mercedes is now looking for ways to protect supplies. The move underscores China's dominance of the critical minerals industry, which puts China in a powerful position as more countries explore alternative energy. It's seen as leverage by China in its trade war with the U.S. China produces around 90% of the world's rare earths. The EU Trade Commissioner said on Wednesday that he and his Chinese counterpart have agreed to clarify the rare earth situation as quickly as possible. And the EU Commissioner for Industrial Strategy said, "We must reduce our dependencies on all countries, particularly on a number of countries like China, on which we are more than 100% dependent." Mercedes-Benz is talking to its top suppliers about building rare earth stockpiles. But the car maker has not seen any impact from a shortage that has caused some suppliers to shut down plants and production lines. A Mercedes-Benz board member in charge of production said, We've learned a lot from the semiconductor situation in the automotive industry and are constantly looking at what risk portfolio we still have in the supply chain. Earlier on Wednesday, Europe's Auto Supplier Association, CLEPA, said several plants and production lines had been shut down due to a shortage of rare earths caused by China's export restrictions, warning of further outages to come. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
According to the National Retail Federation, spending on Father's Day is expected to reach $24 billion this year. That's a record and way up from last year's $22.4 billion. Of about 8,200 survey respondents, the average person plans to drop about $200. That will go to things like greeting cards, clothing, a special outing, and gift cards. Less than half of the respondents are buying for fathers or stepfathers, though. Just over half are buying for husbands, sons, brothers, friends, or grandfathers. Father's Day will be on Sunday, June 15th. The boss makes too much money. That's the message Warner Brothers Discovery shareholders sent to the company Tuesday. Nearly 60% of them voted against WB Discovery's 2024 executive payouts. CEO David Zavslav's total compensation was nearly $52 million last year. During the same period, WB Discovery saw its stock slide 7%. In contrast, Netflix paid its two co-CEOs nearly $62 million and $60 million, while Disney paid Bob Iger $41 million. But Netflix stock soared more than 80% and Disney picked up 24%. At the end of the day, the shareholder vote is purely symbolic. The board of directors has the final say on executive compensation. Forbes is out with its annual list of America's richest self-made women, and 16 celebrities are ranked among the top 100 entrepreneurs, executives, and entertainers, including Oprah Winfrey, reality star Kim Kardashian, and singer Taylor Swift. Actress and singer Selena Gomez, singers Rihanna, Madonna, and Beyonce also are among the richest female celebrities. A new first in American aviation, a passenger-carrying electric airplane has landed in New York. The flight ferried passengers from East Hampton to New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the technology.
A 2 to 3 hour drive shaved to under 45 minutes. That's how long it took this all-electric plane to fly from East Hampton, New York to JFK. Founder and CEO of Beta Technologies, Kyle Clark, touted the aircraft yesterday after it landed.
So this is a 100% electric airplane that just flew from East Hampton to JFK with passengers on it, which was a first for the New York Port Authority for the New York area. And, we covered 70 odd nautical miles in 35 minutes.
Clark says the technology cuts costs.
The most transformative thing is that you drastically reduce the cost of flying. Charging this thing up and flying out here cost us about $8 in fuel, right? Of course, you have to pay for the pilot, you got to pay for the airplane, but fundamentally it's way less expensive.
Transportation companies and airlines are looking to develop services using electric battery-powered aircraft. Clark described yesterday's in-flight experience.
It's quieter, so the communities are happier. It's a simpler aircraft, so you're quiet, you're accessible, and people love flying it. If you ask the passengers how they liked it, we could talk to each other the whole time. There's no propeller in front of you, there's no jet engine. It's just a quiet whooshing across the plane.
Some vehicles can take off and land vertically, allowing travelers to beat traffic. In October, the Federal Aviation Administration finalized comprehensive training and pilot certification rules for flying air taxis. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Researchers in Japan have developed a plastic that dissolves in seawater within hours. It offers up a potential solution for a modern-day scourge polluting oceans and harming wildlife. Here's more.
Could this bit of plastic be the answer to a modern-day plague that's choking oceans and harming wildlife? Its Japanese developers say it's as strong as conventional petroleum-based plastics, but can dissolve in seawater within hours. This new supramolecular plastic was co-developed by the University of Tokyo and the Riken Center for Emergent Matter Science. The center's group director and lead researcher Takuzo Aida explains that it's made by combining two ionic monomers to form a salt bond, which keeps it strong and flexible. But the trick is, this plastic material is highly sensitive to salt.
中に存在する塩分に対する
When it comes into contact with salt, it will break down into its original raw materials. Then, these raw materials themselves can be decomposed by bacteria, meaning that they ultimately return to the environment as safe substances.
Ida says tests in salt solutions similar to seawater saw the plastic dissolve in about 2 to 3 hours, depending on size and thickness. It works in soil too, if a little slower. Ida says tests showed a small piece of the plastic decomposed after about 200 hours. Studies have found many existing biodegradable plastics don't break down fully. That leaves behind the microplastics that are found everywhere these days. Microplastics are fragments less than 1/5 of an inch in size. In 2020, an estimated 2.7 million tons of it seeped into the environment, the UN Environment Programme said. Researchers have even found microplastics in the human brain, arteries, and other organs. Currently, less than 9% of global plastic waste is successfully recycled. And plastic pollution is set to triple by 2040, according to the UN. That means adding up to 37 million metric tons of plastic waste to the world's oceans each year. The new material is still in its development phase, but Ida hopes their fully degradable plastic will prove useful for the packaging industry and become a safe, sustainable substitute.
こういう状況であっても毎年毎年作る
The amount of plastic being produced is increasing every year, he says. So if we can help stop that growth and even begin to reduce it, that would be the most meaningful contribution we could make.
になるかなというふうに思ってるんですね。
The S&P 500 ended slightly higher today. It was supported by gains in technology stocks. The S&P and NASDAQ posted their strongest monthly gains since November 2023. Here, take a look. The S&P trading at $5,970 or so. That's up about 0.01%. NASDAQ trading at $19,460. Again, just up about 0.3% here. It's buoyed by improving trade rhetoric and strong earnings reports. Barclays raised its year-end target for the S&P 500, citing easing trade uncertainty and expected earnings growth in 2026. On the corporate front, Hewlett-Packard and Global Foundries rose on solid AI and chip investment news. Wells Fargo reached a 3-month high after the Federal Reserve lifted its $1.9 trillion asset cap. However, Tesla declined on continued sales drops in Europe.